Have you ever noticed how buying a car feels less like making a financial decision and more like making a decision about who you are? Maybe you've stood in a dealership showroom before. Bright lights, a spotless car that still smells brand new. The salesperson tells you the monthly payment is lower than you expected. Then they ask a simple question. So, do you want to buy it or would you rather lease? It sounds like they're asking whether you'd like coffee or tea, but they're not. They're asking you to make a decision that could quietly affect tens of thousands of dollars over the next several years. And the strange part is, most people don't actually answer that question with math. They answer it with emotion. They think about how they'll look driving away. They think about finally replacing the unreliable car that's been stressing them out every morning. They think about what friends, coworkers, neighbors, or even family might think. Because deep down, cars have never just been transportation. They're symbols. Symbols of success, freedom, stability. Sometimes even proof that we're finally doing okay. And that's exactly why this decision is so difficult. Because when emotions meet monthly payments, it's surprisingly easy to convince yourself that almost any number makes sense. Today, I don't want to tell you whether leasing is better than buying. I want to show you something more valuable. I want to show you why so many intelligent people end up making expensive car decisions without even realizing it. Because once you understand the psychology, the math starts making a lot more sense. Here's something I think we rarely admit. Most people don't actually buy cars, they buy monthly payments. Think about that for a second. Imagine two vehicles sitting next to each other. One costs $30,000, the other costs $52,000. You'd assume people carefully compare those prices, but that's rarely what happens. Instead, they ask one question. What's the monthly payment? It's fascinating. A $700 monthly payment somehow feels more manageable than saying, I'm spending over $40,000 after interest. Our brains naturally divide large numbers into smaller pieces because smaller numbers feel less painful. Behavioral economists sometimes call this payment framing. It's why subscription services are everywhere. It's why gyms advertise monthly memberships instead of annual costs. It's why streaming platforms don't ask for 10 years of payments up front. Small recurring numbers simply feel easier to accept. Car dealerships understand this incredibly well. And to be fair, monthly payments do matter. Most people can't write a check for an entire vehicle. Financing is completely normal, but when the monthly payment becomes the only thing we're looking at, we stop asking better questions. How much interest am I paying? How quickly is this car losing value? How long will I actually keep it? What happens after the loan ends? Would I even want this vehicle 6 years from now? These questions aren't exciting. They're quiet. They're practical. And because they're practical, they're often ignored. There's another reason this decision becomes emotional. Cars are one of the few purchases we experience every single day. You don't wear every shirt every day. You don't sit on every chair every day. But your car, it becomes part of your morning routine. It drives you to work, to family dinners, to vacations, to difficult conversations, to celebrations. It's almost like another room in your house, so naturally we begin attaching emotions to it. That's perfectly human. The challenge is making sure those emotions don't quietly become expensive. Let's simplify this. Imagine two friends. Sarah decides to buy a car. David decides to lease one. Both drive similar vehicles. Both pay similar monthly amounts. From the outside, their financial lives look almost identical. But under the surface, they're doing completely different things. When Sarah buys the car, she's gradually becoming its owner. Each payment increases her ownership. Eventually, the payments stop. The car is hers. It may not be worth what she paid for it. Cars depreciate. Most new cars lose a significant portion of their value during the first few years. That's simply how cars work. But even after depreciation, she owns something. David's lease works differently. Instead of paying toward ownership, he's mostly paying for the depreciation during the years he drives the vehicle. Think of it like renting an apartment. You enjoy living there. But eventually, you hand back the keys. Nothing wrong with that. Renting housing makes perfect sense for many people. Leasing can make sense too. The mistake happens when people assume leasing and buying are simply two different payment methods. They're not. They're two completely different financial experiences. Let's use easy numbers. Suppose a car costs $40,000. 5 years later, maybe it's worth around $22,000. Very roughly speaking, around $18,000 of value disappeared through depreciation. Again, every vehicle is different. Some lose value faster, some slower. But depreciation is unavoidable. Buying means you're paying for the car itself while gradually building ownership. Leasing often means you're mainly paying for that lost value during the lease period. Neither is automatically good or bad. It depends entirely on how you use the vehicle. That's where psychology enters again. Here's something fascinating. Leasing often gives you access to a nicer car than buying with the same monthly payment. That's incredibly tempting. Let's say your budget is around $500 each month. Buying might get you a practical sedan. Leasing might put you into a luxury vehicle. Suddenly, the nicer car feels affordable. Except, the car didn't become cheaper. The payment structure changed. Our brains often mistake affordability for accessibility. Just because something fits into this month's budget doesn't automatically mean it's inexpensive. It's similar to buying furniture with zero-interest financing, or purchasing the latest smartphone through monthly installments, or subscribing to multiple streaming services. Individually, each payment feels small. Together, they quietly reshape your finances. This is sometimes called lifestyle inflation, not because you're irresponsible, because humans naturally adapt. We get used to nicer things remarkably quickly. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. The new leather seats become normal, the larger screen becomes expected, the smoother ride becomes invisible. What once felt luxurious simply becomes everyday life. And that's when something interesting happens. Returning to a smaller car suddenly feels like losing something, even if your financial life would improve. Now here's where many discussions become unfair. People often act like buying is always the financially responsible choice. That's not entirely true. Let's imagine someone buys an expensive SUV, 7-year loan, minimal down payment, high interest. They trade it in after 3 years because they want something newer. Then they repeat the process again and again and again. Technically, they're buying, but financially, they're behaving very similarly to someone who leases forever, always making payments, always upgrading, always restarting depreciation. Ownership alone doesn't create wealth. Keeping assets longer often does. This is one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding cars. Buying creates the opportunity to stop making payments. It doesn't guarantee it. The guarantee comes from your behavior afterward. Here's a question that changed how I think about vehicles. What happens after the loan ends? Imagine someone finances a car for 5 years. Month 60 arrives, no more payments. Many people immediately think, time for another car. But imagine doing something different. Imagine driving that paid-off vehicle for another 5 years. Suddenly, your transportation costs drop dramatically. You're still paying for maintenance, insurance, fuel, repairs. But the biggest monthly expense disappears. That gap between paying for a car and driving one you already own is where a surprising amount of financial breathing room comes from. Not because you're denying yourself happiness, because you've allowed time to work in your favor. Think about two neighbors. Both earn similar incomes. One always has a car payment. The other hasn't had one for 4 years. Which household has more flexibility when unexpected expenses appear? When job uncertainty arrives? When medical bills happen? When they want to travel? When they want to invest? Sometimes wealth isn't created by earning dramatically more. Sometimes it's created by permanently removing recurring expenses. That's much less exciting, but often far more powerful. Cars occupy a strange place in modern life. They're visible. People notice them, which makes them emotionally different from retirement accounts. Nobody compliments your emergency fund. Nobody walks past your investment portfolio and says, "Wow, but they'll absolutely notice your vehicle. That visibility changes our behavior. Humans are social creatures. We compare constantly, sometimes without realizing it. A coworker gets a nicer car, a neighbor upgrades, someone on social media posts delivery photos. Little by little, our definition of normal shifts upward. This phenomenon is sometimes called the social comparison effect. We rarely compare downward, we compare sideways and upward. And because there's always someone driving something newer, the finish line keeps moving. That's exhausting and expensive. Here's something worth remembering. Most people spend surprisingly little time thinking about your car. You're probably thinking about it far more than anyone else, the same way you're mostly thinking about your own life. Everyone else is doing the same. Realizing this can be strangely freeing. Let's imagine two choices. Option 1. You spend an extra $300 every month on a more expensive vehicle. Option 2. You choose the slightly less expensive vehicle and keep that $300. At first glance, the difference feels small, $300. But money has an interesting habit. It compounds, not only through investing, but through flexibility. That $300 might become an emergency cushion, it might reduce stress, it might help cover childcare, it might allow someone to reduce overtime, it might fund a vacation that actually creates lasting memories. The point isn't that everyone should invest every dollar. The point is recognizing that every recurring payment quietly competes with every other future possibility. That's opportunity cost, not punishment, simply trade-offs. Every yes creates a no somewhere else. After everything we've discussed, you might assume leasing is always the wrong decision. Not necessarily. There are situations where leasing fits someone's life extremely well. Maybe someone values always driving newer vehicles and genuinely budgets for it. Maybe their career depends on presenting clients with a reliable current vehicle. Maybe they prefer predictable maintenance costs. Maybe they simply enjoy driving new cars and consciously accept the trade-off. There's nothing inherently irrational about spending money on something that genuinely improves your life. The important word is consciously. Problems usually appear when people accidentally choose luxury while believing they're choosing affordability. Those aren't the same thing. I think the biggest realization isn't about leasing or buying. It's about asking a better question. Instead of asking, which car can I afford every month? Try asking, what kind of financial life am I trying to build? Those questions often lead to different answers. One focuses on today, the other includes tomorrow. Neither ignores enjoyment. But one remembers that today's excitement eventually becomes tomorrow's routine. Money isn't just numbers, it's optionality. It's breathing room, it's sleeping well at night, it's saying yes when opportunities appear, and saying no without panic when they don't. Cars matter, they're useful. Sometimes they're enjoyable, but they shouldn't quietly become the center of your financial identity. If you're deciding between leasing and buying, slow the decision down. Don't let the monthly payment be the only number you look at. Ask yourself how long you realistically keep cars. If you typically replace vehicles every 2 or 3 years, be honest about that pattern instead of pretending this purchase will somehow be different. Think about what your transportation costs might look like 5 years from now and 10 years from now. Picture yourself driving a paid-off vehicle. How would that change your monthly budget? How would it change your stress? If you're leaning toward leasing, ask whether you're choosing it because it genuinely fits your lifestyle or because it lets you drive something more expensive than you otherwise would. There's no shame in either answer. But clarity matters, because financial decisions become much easier when we're honest about the emotions involved. Finally, remember that a reliable car doesn't have to impress anyone. Its primary job is to safely get you where you're going. Everything beyond that is a personal preference, and preferences are perfectly okay, as long as we recognize them for what they are. When people argue about leasing versus buying, they often talk as if there's one universal answer. There isn't. There are only trade-offs. Buying offers the possibility of years without payments. Leasing offers the experience of driving newer vehicles with different financial commitments. Neither choice automatically makes someone wise or foolish. The real difference comes from awareness, from understanding why you're making the decision, from recognizing the quiet influence of status, comparison, convenience, and emotion, because once you see those forces, you stop reacting automatically, you start choosing intentionally, and maybe that's the most valuable lesson hidden inside a conversation about cars. Not that one option wins, but that every financial decision becomes easier when you stop asking what looks successful and start asking what actually creates peace of mind. At the end of the day, very few people remember what car you drove 5 years ago, but you'll remember whether you felt constantly stretched or comfortably in control. You'll remember whether money felt like something chasing you or something quietly supporting the life you wanted to build. Progress rarely comes from finding the perfect financial decision. It comes from making slightly better ones consistently over time. So whether you lease your next car or buy it, I hope you make that choice with open eyes. Not because someone on the internet told you what the right answer was, but because the numbers, your priorities, and your future all point in the same direction. And when those three things finally align, money starts feeling a little less stressful, a little more intentional, and a lot more like a tool instead of a source of anxiety. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, and remember, financial peace is rarely built through perfect decisions. It's built through thoughtful ones, repeated over and over again. If you want to keep seeing the math that the industry hopes you never do, hit subscribe because the next one might cost you even more if you miss it. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.